President Museveni. On behalf of the people of Uganda, I am challenging you to a free and fair election.
This is a message to the government.
I met Bobi at university. I didn't know he was a musician. He was different.
We are fighting for freedom.
I didn't have so many dreams. She impacted my life. She made me realize we had to impact other lives. I've come to Parliament and taken an oath to protect the Constitution of Uganda.
Somebody had to speak for us. People thought I had the loudest voice. We are fighting for freedom. Again, one more confident time.
This year's presidential election could see 71-year-old President Museveni serve a fifth term in office.
No leader has ever handed over power peacefully. This is a military regime dressed in a civil facade.
We have the Honorable Bobi Wine with us.
As a matter of fact, now I'm doing the rest.
Why is my husband held in a military barracks? If I could see him, then I would know what I am actually dealing with.
Our Bobi should be released.
I would rather represent the resilience of Ugandans. We stand for equality and dignity for everybody. We are non-violent, and we continue to preach non-violence.
I am not a criminal. I am a presidential candidate.
Nothing will stop him.
We must get our freedom or we shall die trying. We are fighting for freedom. We are fighting for freedom.
Es que te quiero mucho. Hola.
Ahora parece que
Y yo aquí para recordar quién fue Augusto Bondi.
Yo soy Augusto. ¿Y tú qué eres?
Yo soy la Pauli. Nos conocemos hace más de 20 años.
mañana vas a encontrar.
Nos parece muy importante reconstituir la memoria. Es siempre un intento de verse a sí mismos.
Lo importante es que no me olvides a mí.
También necesitamos asumir los dolores, elaborar nuestros duelos.
Estoy buscando a mis hijos. ¿Qué me pasa? Me has regalado tantas cosas maravillosas.
Belleza que quiero olvidar, me llama, me viene a buscar, me hace...
Quiero estar contigo toda la vida.
في الفيلم هذا باش نحاول نحكي حكاية بنت ألفا. ألفا عندها 4 بنات.
هذيك المصيبة، لأني من نكره الطفلة وكنت ما حبيتش نجيب حتى الطفلة.
الزوز الصغار آية وتيسير مازالوا عايشين معاها، والزوز الكبار تلاقيهم الذيب. باش تتعرفوا على زوز ممثلات اللي باش يمثلوا أدوار أخواتكم الكبار.
أنا يا حتى هما كانوا كيفكم هكاك. كي لبست غفران النقاب مخلينا ما عملنا فيها سلطنا عليه العنصرية بتاعنا مرتاح مع روحك مرتاح في راسك
انتي وقتها ما تحشميش على روحك
نهار آخر في الدرك الأسفل وأكثر إنسان مش باش نسامحك طول حياتي إنه كل حاجة باش نعيشوها هي صارت ودايما بربشوا في الجروح متاعنا ونكرهك نكرهك نكرهك
ليش بقصوا؟
اللي فهمته من الفيلم اللي مش يكون دوري كما دور روس في فيلم تيتانيك
حبيت بدلي جديد
هي مش تحكي في حكاية فاتت فما ممثلين اخرين اللي هم مش يمثلوا الواقع اللي متاع القصه هذيك
روحي والدم كيف ما يرجع الفرطة طول النار اللي تحرقه كيف ما يرجع الفلاح للأرض اللي تعرقه كيف ما يرجع الملاح للبحر اللي غرقه نرجع لك حاير ومهين
Someone once told me, wars don't start with explosions. They start with silence.
Лично видим визуально. Танки зашли с надписью Z.
Город Мариуполь блокирован со всех сторон.
Russians have entered the city. The war has begun. And we have to tell its story.
Хорошо, что тут есть пресса. Снимайте.
This is painful to watch. But it must be painful to watch.
Вони нанесли бомбовий удар. Вон там! Хирургический корпус, вот там вот!
А, вы госпитале, да?
Мамочка!
Не знаешь, куда бежать.
Чего расстраиваешься?
Не хочу, чтобы я умирала.
Репортажи ваши разошлись. Конечно, огромное дело сделать.
Они столько пережили с мамами.
If the world saw everything that happened in Mariupol, it would give at least some meaning to this horror. My brain will desperately want to forget all this. But the camera will not let it happen.
Let's start just by talking about how you got into these particular stories. I mean, Christopher, this is, as you can see even just from the trailer, it's the story of basically a pop star turned unlikely politician in Uganda, Bobi Wine. What brought you to that story?
Yeah, so I grew up in Uganda, and my father had grown up in Uganda, so I was sort of aware of what was going on, and I was aware that there'd been a dictatorship at that point for 35 years. There's never been a peaceful transfer of power in Uganda for the whole story since they were freed from British colonialism. And I met Bobi and Barbie in Europe, and I was just completely blown away with them. Here was a man who'd grown up in the ghetto. He'd had sort of nothing. He'd lost his parents very young, and he pulled himself out of the ghetto, got himself into university, all self-paid by singing, and then he met Barbie, and she became his moral compass, and she basically, it's a love story of her leading him through to this new life of standing up for the people of Uganda. And it just seemed to me when I first met them, I was like, oh my God, this is a script. And then I went out to Uganda and I met my co-director, Moses Bwaya, who was on the front line a lot, yeah. So yeah, that was how it came about.
So it was just the idea that this is somebody I want to follow in these particular circumstances?
Yeah, it just seemed like it's a story of the fragility of democracy, which was obviously a story all over the world. But what had happened, originally they'd had a constitution in Uganda and had been eroded by this one individual who came in, who famously said when he came in, the problem with Africa, in particular Uganda, is leaders who stay too long, and 38 years later he's still there. And what he did is he got rid of all the institutions which were meant to protect the people, the judiciary, the electoral commission, the military, the police force. He got rid of them all. And now he stands there and he basically, I mean, by his own admission, he says, I'm working for my family and my friends. And you've got 44 million people in Uganda who are very poor. The healthcare is terrible. The education is shocking. Most people are going to school. And Bobi comes along and he gives up his career. And now he can no longer perform. He can't be played on the radio. So they've stripped him of his means of making any sort of a living. But he's kind of carried on and risked everything, and if you get to see the film, he was tortured and locked up and subjected to the most terrible things. But he's stood firm, and he stood firm for all groups of society. He's turned into a complete African hero. He's an amazing man.
Kaouther, for you, I mean, yours is a very adventurous documentary because it's a real mixture of nonfiction and narrative ideas and techniques. But before we talk about that, I just want to ask, what led you to the story of this woman in Tunisia who has 4 daughters, 2 of them still live with her, and 2 of whom are gone for reasons we discover in the film?
It was in 2016. The mother made public the story of her daughter. So I heard an interview of her on TV, on the radio. Then I saw her in other programs. And I was fascinated by this bigger-than-life, flawed character and the story of her daughters. So I automatically felt that there is a story to be told, and I contacted one of the journalists. He gave me her number, and yeah, the adventure started from there. I was thinking about doing a more conventional documentary, so I filmed a little bit, 2016, 2017, but finally I threw up in the garbage all what I filmed because it wasn't good enough. It wasn't, it doesn't translate all the multi-layered aspect of this story and all the complexity. So I put this aside. I did The Man Who Sold His Skin, which is my previous movie, and then I came back with a fresh set of mind and thought about this form, which is, we are still in the documentary, but it's such a wonderful form, genre, because it's extensible and we can go near to the frontier and still do amazing things.
Before you did it, you had been making narrative films like The Man Who Sold His Skin, which was also nominated for an Oscar in the international category. When you made that, did you always think, all right, I'm going to go back and make nonfiction films as well?
Yeah, because, when I started as a filmmaker, I did a short movie and I was really scared by fiction. I thought it's a lie. I'll never capture a believable story. And it's not a job for me doing film. And then I started by doing documentaries, and I thought, this is wonderful. This is a wonderful school. So what I'm trying to do is to go back to documentary between 2 fiction, because I learn a lot and I experiment a lot, and all what I learn, I use it in fiction. So it's a great school, and it's my first love, the documentary.
Michelle, for you, this film sort of grew out of basically AP reporting from the early days of the Russian invasion in Ukraine. What you were at PBS, and the footage was coming in to you, but originally not as a film, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm a producer and editor for Frontline PBS, a series on PBS, and I have the privilege of working with a lot of different filmmakers on telling stories, and they're made in many different ways. But this was an unconventional situation where the team of Associated Press journalists who are Ukrainian and were in Mariupol during the first 20 days of the full-scale invasion of the country were able to document and dispatch and send out these harrowing, vivid accounts of what was happening on the ground. And I certainly remember seeing it in real time as it was coming in and being shown on the news. It's a very memorable moment that some of you may remember are the images of the woman who was being taken out of a maternity hospital that had just been shelled, and her name is Irina. She did later die, and the reason we know her name and we know the story of Irina is because Mstislav Chernov, the director of the film, and the other reporters who were there with him, Vasilisa Stepanenko and Evgeny Maloletka, were there to capture this. And after they were there for 20 days and ultimately did have to leave, much to their regret, they wanted to stay and keep reporting, but it was determined that it truly was becoming unsafe for them to be there. They were the last international journalists that were in the city documenting what was happening. They were able to leave, and Mstislav had a hard drive of footage of nearly between 35 and 40 hours of footage that he knew more could be done with. And so this was around the time when Frontline and the Associated Press began discussing how can we use this material and make a film that will transcend these incremental and disparate sort of documentation of the war that we see in the news or in our social media feeds, and maybe make something that feels like a document and record of what happened in this time.
So you're basically taking material, much of which has been used as daily journalism, right? That has been seen, and approaching it just in a very different way to craft a film out of it.
That's right. Yeah, Mstislav is an extremely talented videographer, reporter, journalist who's been working and doing this conflict reporting for the AP for nearly a decade, and much of it on the war in his own country. And so he's built this skill set of being able to film, edit short pieces, and dispatch, film, edit, dispatch, film, edit, file. And what we, so he already had these really strong moments and these really strong interpretations of what he'd seen on the ground. And what I was able to do in the edit was watch everything, the raw material, and think about how to take those shorter pieces and construct them and build them in a way that created a more comprehensive story, and worked really closely with him on that.
Maite, for Eternal Memory, I mean, how did you decide to make a film that, you know, it's a beautiful love story basically set against a you know, backdrop of he has Alzheimer's and has been fighting it for 10 years, and you know, he's a well-known journalist in Chile. But how did you, what was your way in? How did you decide, okay, there's a movie?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I'm really proud to be part of these films, among these films on this generation of Oscars. And yeah, it's sad to not have To Kill a Tiger here that I also love, but I'm very proud to be sharing with you. Yeah, it was like a lucky encounter for me, the film. I knew the characters for all my life because I admired them. She was a very important actress. He was a very important journalist. And I met them in a work context. I saw them in the university that she works. And I saw that she bring him to the work when he already has Alzheimer. And all the people that work with her help her to be in the work with him, and they were in love, and it was a very like surprising relationship. And since my first encounter, I thought like, yeah, I have to follow them. I have to make a film of this, because I have been shooting in my previous film people with dementia, but there are always stories about isolation, loneliness, like. And And here I felt like the Alzheimer as a challenge and not as a tragedy, and a real love relationship when they were all the time having a good time, even in the worst moments. So yeah, it was like a love story, and I started pitch it as a love story, and I said to her, I want to tell your love story, and she was like, there's not a love story here, like I don't see it. Now at least she realized that it was. But yeah, that was the starting point.
Your last film, which also got an Oscar nomination, The Mole Agent, was another lovely film that was set in a sort of a retirement home where this guy goes undercover. I mean, are you attracted to, you know, stories of people late in life?
I am attracted of stories about fragility. I think in general that we are not so used to show our own fragility and embrace it and understand that it's part of life. And I think that both films in different ways have characters that we love and I love, and they are passing not so good moments, but you wanted to share with them. And as I say, like people that must be in the world in that fragility situations. And I think that is one of my goals as a filmmaker, like to understand that illness and fragility, it's part of life, and show it in not in a drama way. And that it's the good thing about documentaries, that I think, because all of us work in a genre that do not have another categories. Like when you make fiction, like you are forced to say like, okay, it's a thriller, it's a comedy, it's a drama. We are documentaries. And in a documentary, you can have everything in a film. So if you see The Eternal Memory or The Mole Agent, it's like people have fun, people laugh, people cry, like all the emotions coexist, because categories do not exist in lives. And that is what I want to show. Like you can be having a very sad moment, but then you have a very nice day, and that is what I want to represent. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's talk about the specific challenges of each of these films. I mean, Christopher, for you, you're filming a guy who is, you know, who's being shot at by the police, who is being arrested and tortured because he represents a threat to the established government. I mean, does that extend to? Did you feel like you were, you know, your crew, your co-director, were you in danger as well?
Yeah, I mean, everyone around Bobi was in danger. I mean, Moses got shot in the face and he spent some time in prison. But everyone, and there's lots of other cameramen who we actually got footage from who were hurt and injured, and one guy has lost quite a lot of functionality. Yeah, it's a war zone. I mean, you know, they're following this guy, and the police and the army are attacking the opposition, and they're constantly under you know, being, I mean, in the film, for people who haven't seen it, Bobi steps out of the car, and he had been driving, and his driver moves into the position. His driver was wearing the same cap, and someone just comes up and put a pistol and shoots him dead, thinking that they've killed Bobi. We then, you know, Bobi's in this hotel, and they surround the whole hotel, still going after him. And eventually they get him, and he disappears. And as far as we're concerned, he's dead. And Barbie is obviously his wife, sort of, you know, in floods of tears. And we managed to get a huge amount of press. We just went crazy. We knew the only way we could possibly save him was, you know, we got the New York Times, we got the Guardian, we got everyone came out in support of this guy. And you know, eventually they put him in front of a court and charged him with treason, you know, and obviously the treason carries the death penalty. So it was just like relentless. But I mean, the whole thing about Bobi, what is incredible, is he just won't stop, and he's now got it into his head that he's going to liberate this country, and it's an ongoing story. It hasn't stopped. I mean, it's, you know, I was with Barbie in London, and Bobi was campaigning out in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly she got a text from a European embassy saying there's a plan to assassinate your husband today. and Bobi was standing on a car campaigning, and this was really recently, and so we were desperately trying to get hold of someone else to get him off the car, take him. So it's ongoing. I mean, you know, and Bobi and Barbie go back to this, and I mean, 2 weeks ago he was under house arrest for a week, and it's just relentless, yeah. But I mean, they're extraordinary people.
So does the attention that you brought on him by making this movie, by filming him, does that help, or does that make it more dangerous for him?
No, it makes him much safer. You know, I think they kind of missed the moment to kill him, and I think they realize that. I think it's very difficult to kill him now. But what they do is they have this sort of campaign of terror, is they go around and pick up people. If you're wearing a Bobi Wine t-shirt or a cap, or they'll pick you up, and you will lightly disappear, or you'll end up in a ditch, or you'll, you know, come out a month later tortured or whatever. So they try and kind of control the population with fear. But I've just never met someone who is so brave and so resilient you know, he's been on a journey of discovery himself, and he's become this sort of liberal, enlightened man who has really, it's amazing. From where he came from and where he is today is just quite extraordinary. They're amazing, and his wife is incredible.
Kaouther, let's talk about the challenges of this, you know, very sort of adventurous format that you use in this film. I mean, you have the two daughters who are gone. You have actresses play them. You sometimes have an actress play the mother. You have, you know, the real people talking to the actors and actresses who are playing them. I mean, it's really this maze of different techniques to tell a story. I mean, how did you hit on, you know, this is how this story should be told, and what were the challenges of doing that?
Yeah, hearing you, I was like, this movie is confusing, you know. So it was my main obsession to make a complex movie without making a confusing movie, because I don't want to lose the audience. But I think my main idea was to create something like a Brechtian theater, where we are summoning a memory, a past, with the actor. I mean, the real character are directing the actors, so they can bring their memory to the present, and then go out of the scene and think about and analyze those memories in a kind of introspective journey to understand the origin of this tragedy, what happened to those girls. So I thought about this form because it gives me the possibility to bring the past to life, because how can we documentarian film the past without using the horrible cliche called reenactment, you know? So yeah, there was this side to it, but also the other side. And what I was thinking about is to blur the line between what is acted and what is not, because we see there is really little acting in the movie. It's all about how the real character think about their lives and how the actors discuss this with their own points of view. So yeah, it was all of this together, trying to render the complexity without making it confusing. It wasn't an easy task, but here we are.
I mean, there are scenes in the movie that I can't imagine you thought ahead of time, okay, I'm going to film this conversation between the actors and the people they're playing. I mean, it feels like there's stuff in the movie where things are just happening as they're sitting around, and you're thinking, oh, maybe that should go in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I was the first audience of my own movie. That's why also I go back to documentary, you know, to be the first person who watched my movie. So everything is happening without my control. I have little control. I mean, I ask them, I tell them today we'll talk about this memory, for example, and they start talking, acting, all this. So I'm like surprised, and when I have a strong feeling about the scene, I know that it will end up in the editing at the end.
Michelle, I thinking about what Kaouther is saying, I think something very much different. I had a conversation a couple months ago with Mstislav, and he was talking about how there were times when he had shot stuff, but the microphone wasn't really good, and he wanted to give the sense of what it felt like and what it sounded like there, so he was going to beef up the explosions and things. And that the PBS frontline people said, you can't change anything, because if you do, the Russians are going to use this as propaganda and say, you're manipulating the footage, this isn't exactly what happened. I mean, is that something that you guys think about in films like this?
Yeah, and I just want to remark also on how unique and special the approach of every single film. Hearing you guys talk about them has reminded me once again of how, as Maite said, like documentaries can be so many things, and so it's really special to be here talking about them with you guys. And they can be so many things, and Frontline specializes in journalistic documentaries, I guess you could say, and we do have a lot of editorial constraints and guidelines that we do have to follow, and they can feel very restrictive sometimes, but ultimately are in the best interest of the journalism and the efficacy and authenticity of the film and the power that it can have as a document, as a record of its time. Now, that's not to say that they can't be artful, that they can't have, a lot of thought was put into the construction of the film and sort of what moments we chose to keep and what moments we chose to build around. So, for instance, one of the things that we did in the edit was discover that when you watch the raw footage, Mstislav is very much a presence behind the camera, and that his point of view as the journalist is helpful in understanding and accessing the material that you're witnessing. And so a sequence of harrowing, difficult scenes in succession is a very different, that you can't just throw that all onto an edit timeline and expect that to make a movie. Like you really, we needed to think about who's telling the story, why are they telling the story, and also allow some space for him to authentically communicate what he's grappling with as a conflict journalist and doing this over time, and the potential, the feelings of the futility of the work and how much is it actually changing. It's hard in the edit sometimes to be told you can't actually do this thing that in other cases, in other films or in other spaces would be absolutely like they're helping to tell these stories. But that's not to say that we didn't think hard about how to tell it in a way that would make the footage accessible. That's not to be confused with acceptable, because that was very much a deliberate decision, was to not make this a sanitized version of what war looks like and feels like. And so Mstislav's intention in doing anything was always to try to make you feel more like you were there. And that was because if you make war acceptable, that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah. I mean, I found one of the most powerful things about the film is how often the people you're filming in these horrifying circumstances, they don't say, get the camera out of my face. They look in the camera and say, tell this story. And it happens multiple times in the film. And I'm wondering, as you're putting this together and you have people, staring at the camera and saying, tell this story, you must really feel like, okay, we got to get this right.
Yeah, it was very motivating. And I know it was to them as they were in the field as well. Mstislav was being approached. They're wearing press insignia, helmets, and carrying cameras. And not only were people approaching them to ask them to film them and say, people need to know what's going on, they also were asking them, what is the news? Is Ukraine still a country? has Kyiv been taken? You know, they don't know anything that's going on. And there's a scene where people are asking, who's bombing us? They truly don't know what's happening. And that is because it was a deliberate intention to create a media blackout in these cities. And it speaks to the power of journalism and information and documentaries to tell people what's going on in their own world. And that didn't exist for even in a short period of time. Mstislav's experience of that was that it just created such chaos and truly contributed to a collapse of a city. Just that, you know, cutting people off from information. Vasilisa, the reporter that was in the field with him as well, said that for the first time she was thinking about how information was more important in this scenario, and it felt like, than food or water to so many people. And I feel lucky that they were there to capture it in real time, because it's also, these are war crimes, potential war crimes that are quickly erased. And so people are still living in the city of Mariupol, of course, under Russian occupation, and the aftermath of what happened there is being built around and won't exist for very much longer. And so because we have footage of what happened in real time on the ground, we'll be able to always know what really took place.
Maite, I feel like it must have been difficult in certain ways to go to, especially to Paulina, the wife of Augusto, and say, you know, I want to film your most intimate moments with your husband. I mean, how did that, was that a difficult thing to get her trust, to get her to open up and allow you to do that?
Yeah, it was very difficult to convince her, and all the reasons that she gave me, probably I will say the same ones if someone asked me in that situation to make a film. And she was a minister of culture too. She know how it's to be exposed, and she didn't want it, and neither in that context. So it was like very long months of conversations, but at the end was he who combines her to do the film, and she always said that it's very grateful for that. And I remember that we were having a lunch, and he cannot take the fork well in that moment, and he said to her, "What is embarrassing to you that I cannot take the fork? I am not embarrassing to show this." And he said, like, during dictatorship, so many people opened the doors to their house, to my camera, to show the pain. So why am not going to open the door to my own house, to the cameras, to show my own fragility? Like he said, like, a register should exist in spite of everything. So it was very brave and clear in that moment. And she was like, okay, I cannot continue discussing this. And in the moment that he combines her, she opened the doors and they completely trust. And well, we've shot for 4.5 years, and they were fastly used to the camera because both of them were with cameras all the time in their lives. So it were more easy than with other subjects, I think. But it was funny also because they have very different relationship with the camera. Like he was an anchorman at the beginning. We put the camera and he moves with the camera, like he never put the back. But it was nice because my DOP of all my films was his cameraman in all his TV program. So they have a very close relationship that helps. And she, as an actress, fastly forgets the presence of the camera. And she took the camera during COVID. That was very special also because she has the consciousness of what is, like, where to put it, like very in an instinctive way. Yeah.
As you're putting the film together, I mean, I feel like you achieve this very delicate tone that is shows absolutely heartbreaking moments and also shows this sense of love and all that sustains this couple. I mean, was that a tricky tone to figure out how far you could go in certain areas?
I think it was not tricky because it was the reality. Like, it was a challenge in the editing to really show the balance and to really show that it was not, as I said before, only a drama or only nice moments. Like, to have the tone and the mood of the relationship. And yeah, that was very important for me as the starting scene, that he woke up in the middle of the night and he doesn't know where he is. And if I were in that situation, probably I will start like, why you don't remember me? Like, getting crazy. And she's like, I'm your wife from 20 years, like making laugh and having fun in that situation, and repeat it again in a very nice mood. And I think that we try always to keep that mood that they have in the relationship on the film. And the challenge, more than to balance that in the editing, was to build the relationships with the past and with the collective memory and with the country. Like, it's a metaphor also of a man that and a paradox, that fight to preserve its historical memory and he's losing it, and a country that it's also losing it. So that was our big challenge, I think, more in the editing room.
That ties into another thing that I wanted to bring up, which is there was, I don't know, not too long ago, there was an article that was a little xenophobic in one of the other trades, where people were basically saying, what's wrong with the Academy? They just nominated foreign films in the documentary category. And I feel like, all of these are such rich glimpses into what's going on in different countries, which should not be considered by any sense a failure on the part of the Academy. It should be, it should show that, the international filmmaking community, especially in nonfiction, is so rich and deserves to be showcased. And I'm just wondering for you guys, I mean, how important is it that these stories from these countries get to be exposed in this way by the Academy?
Well, I mean, you'd like to think that it wasn't about which country they were made in. If there are films made in America or somewhere else, it shouldn't be about that. It should just be about the quality of the storytelling and the story it tells and how it resonates with people who vote. So that seems to be, the idea that it's to do with it's, foreign or not. It seems a bit odd because it is a sort of world community and we're world filmmakers.
It was a very great shortlist. Like, I think that nobody of us make the nominees as a secure thing for us. It was like, we have very big and great films and contenders, and it was a rough year. But I think that I know that we are international, but at the same time, there are so universal issues and so universal stories that I film that are for the world, not from a specific country. And you can see in all these films like metaphors that make sense for all the countries. So yeah, and it's weird for me also it's being a Chilean filmmaker, that when you're from Latin America, you never dream with the Oscars in your life. I have many friends here that it's a possibility in their dreams. Like, it's very far away, and I'm super proud also, like, for the other hand, that we are in a category that it's really more or in a branch that it's really more open, and we discuss another kind of films, another kind of styles. And 10 years ago, that did not happen. Like, to see one film international appear was unbelievable. And I think even or any of the one that will win, it's going to be international for the first time anyway, and it's amazing. Like, from me coming from a small country, that you think that kind of things will never happen. So for me, in that sense, it's a very special and important year.
I just want to say thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you for reminding me how doc panels are always my favorite panels to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.